I stuffed a shirt or two into my old carpet bag, tucked it under my arm, and started for Cape Horn and the Pacific. Quitting the good city of Old Manhattan, I duly arrived in New Bedford. It was a Saturday night in December. Much was I disappointed upon learning that the little packet for Nantucket had already sailed, and that no way of reaching that place would offer, till the following Monday. Now having a night, a day, and still another night following before me in New Bedford, ere I could embark for my destined port, it became a matter of concernment where I was to eat and sleep meanwhile. It was a very dubious-looking, nay, a very dark and dismal night, bitingly cold and cheerless. I knew no one in the place. With anxious grapnels I had sounded my pocket, and only brought up a few pieces of silver. So, wherever you go, Ishmael, said I to myself, as I stood in the middle of a dreary street, shouldering my bag, and comparing the gloom towards the north with the darkness towards the south. Wherever in your wisdom you may conclude to lodge for the night, my dear Ishmael, be sure to inquire the price, and don't be too particular. Moving on, I at last came to a dim sort of light not far from the docks, and heard a forlorn creaking in the air, and looking up, saw a swinging sign over the door, with a white painting upon it, faintly representing a tall straight jet of misty spray, and these words underneath: "The Spouter Inn, Peter Coffin." Coffin, spouter, rather ominous in that particular connection, thought I. But it is a common name in Nantucket, they say, and I suppose this Peter here is an emigrant from there. As the light looked so dim, and the place, for the time, looked quiet enough, and the dilapidated little wooden house itself looked as if it might have been carted here from the ruins of some burnt district, and as the swinging sign had a poverty-stricken sort of creak to it, I thought that here was the very spot for cheap lodgings, and the best of pea coffee. It was a queer sort of place, a gable-ended old house, one side palsied as it were, and leaning over sadly, it stood on a sharp bleak corner, where that tempestuous wind Euroclydon kept up a worse howling than ever it did about poor Paul's tossed craft. Euroclydon, nevertheless, is a mighty pleasant zephyr to anyone indoors, with his feet on the hob quietly toasting for bed. Poor Lazarus there, chattering his teeth against the curbstone for his pillow, and shaking off his tatters with his shiverings. He might plug up both ears with rags, and put a corn cob into his mouth, and yet that would not keep out the tempestuous Euroclydon. Pooh, pooh, what a fine frosty night! How Orion glitters, what northern lights! Let them talk of their oriental summer climes, of everlasting conservatories. Give me the privilege of making my own summer, with my own coals. Entering that gable-ended Spouter Inn, you found yourself in a wide, low, straggling entry, with old-fashioned wainscots, reminding one of the bulwarks of some condemned old craft. On one side hung a very large oil painting, so thoroughly besmoked and every way defaced, that in the unequal crosslights by which you viewed it, it was only by diligent study, and a series of systematic visits to it, and careful inquiry of the neighbors, that you could anywhere arrive at an understanding of its purpose. In fact, the artist's design seemed this: a final theory of my own. The picture represents a Cape Horner in a great hurricane, the half-foundered ship weltering there, with its 3 dismantled masts alone visible, and an exasperated whale, purposing to spring clean over the craft, is in the enormous act of impaling himself upon the 3 mastheads. Upon entering the place, I found a number of young seamen gathered about a table, examining by a dim light divers specimens of scrimshander. I sought the landlord, and telling him I desired to be accommodated with a room, received for answer that his house was full. Not a bed unoccupied?
But avast,
He added, tapping his forehead.
you hain't no objections to sharing a harpooner's blanket. Have ye? I suppose you are going a-whalin', so you'd better get used to that sort of thing.
No man prefers to sleep to in a bed. In fact, you would a good deal rather not sleep with your own brother. I don't know how it is, but people like to be private when they are sleeping, and when it comes to sleeping with an unknown stranger, in a strange inn, in a strange town, and that stranger a harpooner, then your objections indefinitely multiply. Nor was there any earthly reason why I as a sailor should sleep to in a bed, more than anybody else. For sailors no more sleep to in a bed at sea than bachelor kings do ashore. To be sure, they all sleep together in one apartment, but you have your own hammock, and cover yourself with your own blanket, and sleep in your own skin. Landlord, said I, what sort of a chap is he? Does he always keep such late hours? It was now hard upon 12 o'clock. The landlord chuckled again with his lean chuckle, and seemed to be mightily tickled at something.
No,
He answered,
generally he's an early bird. Early to bed and early to rise. Yes, he's the bird what catches the worm. But tonight he went out a-peddling, you see. And I don't see what on earth keeps him so late. Unless, maybe, he can't sell his head.
Can't sell his head. What sort of a bamboozingly story is this you are telling me? Getting into a towering rage. Do you pretend to say, landlord, that this harpooner is actually engaged this blessed Saturday night, or rather Sunday morning, in peddling his head around this town?
That's precisely it.
Said the landlord.
And I told him he couldn't sell it here. The market's overstocked.
With what? Shouted I.
With heads, to be sure. Ain't there too many heads in the world?
I tell you what it is, landlord, said I quite calmly. You'd better stop spinning that yarn to me. I'm not green.
Maybe not.
Taking out a stick and whittling a toothpick.
But I rather guess you'll be done brown, if that ere harpooner hears you a slandering his head.
I'll break it for him, said I, now flying into a passion again, at this unaccountable farrago of the landlord's.
It's broke already,
said he. Broke, said I. Broke, do you mean?
Certain, and that's the very reason he can't sell it. I guess.
Landlord, said I, going up to him as cool as mountain, Hecla in a snowstorm. Landlord, stop whittling. You and I must understand one another, and that too without delay. You will be so good as to unsay that story about selling his head, which if true I take to be good evidence, that this harpooner is stark mad. And I've no idea of sleeping with a madman. And you, sir, you I mean, landlord, you, sir, by trying to induce me to do so knowingly, would thereby render yourself liable to a criminal prosecution.
Wall,
said the landlord, fetching a long breath.
That's a pretty long sermon for a chap. That rips a little now and then. But be easy, be easy. This here harpooner I have been telling you of has just arrived from the South Seas, where he bought up a lot of bombed New Zealand heads, and he's sold all on them but one. And that one he's trying to sell tonight. 'Cause tomorrow's Sunday, and it would not do to be selling human heads about the streets when folks is going to churches. He wanted to last Sunday, but I stopped him just as he was going out of the door, with 4 heads strung on a string, for all the earth like a string of onions.
This account cleared up the otherwise unaccountable mystery, and showed that the landlord, after all, had had no idea of fooling me, but at the same time, what could I think of a harpooner? who stayed out of a Saturday night clean into the holy Sabbath, engaged in such a cannibal business as selling the heads of dead idolaters. Depend upon it, landlord, that harpooner is a dangerous man,
He pays regular.
was the rejoinder.
But come, it's getting dreadful late. You had better be turning flukes.